Hi, Crime Junkie jury. I'm Lauren Conlin, and this is your daily Diddy Digest. We are on day 20 of the United States versus Sean Combs. What a day we had today in court with the beginning of Jane, and that's a pseudonym, her cross-examination, which was done by Tenny Garagos. But I want to talk about what happened this morning before the jury came in. I had mentioned the day before that there might be a potential juror issue. The judge was in the robing room with both lead counsels, and it turns out that there is a juror issue. And the defense kind of let it slip that it's juror number 6. Obviously, nobody knows who that is, but I'm just letting you guys know it was juror number 6. We don't know exactly what happened, but what we do know is that the defense seems to be okay with letting them stay. And the government just said they need to look further into the issue before making any decisions here. So we'll find out soon enough, probably tomorrow. The mistrial was also denied. And the judge basically said that Nicole Westmoreland, during the cross-examination of Brianna Bongelin, she had this Perry Mason moment, and it wasn't exactly fodder for a mistrial. And this Perry Mason moment was when she called Bongelin out about the date, the metadata on the photograph, because Diddy was away. And, Alexandra Shapiro kind of said, well, they believe that the government knew that Bongelin was essentially perjuring herself because they had the date of the photo, they had the invoice of the hotel prior to her testimony, and they let her on the stand anyway. So that's what she was arguing. Also, Shapiro was arguing part of Jane's testimony. She's kind of said, promised quality time is not a federal crime. And I thought that was interesting because I brought that up thinking that, okay, I think this goes to fraud in the indictment, telling Jane that she'd be taken to this island, this private island, and they'd spend time together when they didn't. So Shapiro is writing a motion for that. And the government had written a motion to recall Dr. Don Hughes to talk about trauma, love bombing, and just testimony that would also play into Jane's testimony. And that was denied. The judge kind of cited that it would be prejudice to the defense because, it would sort of indicate to the jury that this witness is more important than other witnesses because they were called twice. So that was essentially the extent of what happened this morning. But let's get into Jane's cross this morning, obviously before lunch, because it got crazier after lunch. But Tenny Garagos, her cross-examination, at the beginning, it felt more like a conversation. And Tenny, her style is much less aggressive than Nicole Westmoreland, than Brian Steele. She's very conversational. You kind of feel like you're talking to a girlfriend, or that was my impression. But she indicated that Jane had met with the government 24 times before taking the stand, and she had actually met with the defense twice as well, and that even though Diddy pays for her attorney, he has not interfered, and they have not seen each other or talked to one another since he was arrested in September of 2024. Now, Tenny also brought up the fact that Jane, she'd indicated that she was a content creator and she couldn't really work when she was with Diddy or during that time because she was so focused on him. And it turns out Jane actually has a dress line as well as a swimsuit line. So she's also an entrepreneur, and she did have this line while she was dating Diddy. And not only did she have it, but Diddy invested money and in her line, and it was profitable at one point. And Jane testified that he was very encouraging to her. He would try to lift her up, and he made her a better person, is kind of what she said. And he would try to, encourage her entrepreneurial spirit. So this kind of came later in the afternoon, but this was the dress line was brought up this morning. But Tenny Garagos essentially said, well, you said in 3 years of being with Diddy, you didn't really do anything. You didn't accomplish anything, but you had 2 fashion lines. And then she brought up the fact that she had this big house that was twice the size of her old apartment, indicating that her child could, run around and just live a better life. And so she was like, so you you had two businesses while you were dating him. You got to live in this beautiful house, and your one of your businesses actually profited. So you did something. And Jane kind of said, well, you know, it is what it is, but I know that I could have done better, or I could have done more if I wasn't really focused on him. Now, some odd things this morning that we heard from Jane is how much she liked to take care of Diddy after these hotel stays, give him massages, cook for him. She talked about giving him foot rubs. And then she said that she liked to bathe him after, which kind of elicited some smirks in the gallery as well as the jury. She also said that Diddy's favorite show is Dateline, and they would watch it together and fall asleep. And again, that everybody was kind of like, really? Dateline? Okay. But yeah, Tenny also brought up the fact that one of the reasons they got this house, and this was indicated through text messages between Jane and Diddy, excuse me, was for privacy. And privacy meaning they didn't want their business at these hotels as much, having the entertainer there, the escort there. So this was indicated through a text message, like Jane saying, yeah, you know, we should get this house for privacy. And also she mentioned the school district is better for her child. But again, they were pointing out to us that Jane was acknowledging they needed privacy for this specific reason. And also, you know, we heard yesterday about Jane and Diddy having a phone just to take these videos, explicit videos. And we also saw text messages from Jane saying that she wished she was with Diddy so they could watch these videos together of her being with other men. And Young Miami was brought up today, and how Jane was very jealous of the public relationship that he had with Young Miami. And I'll get into this after, but something that came up in the afternoon that was very, very spicy. But yeah, she talked about being jealous of Young Miami. She talked about how, that he bought her a Maybach, and she described kind of like Tenny actually got her to say that she was jealous of this Maybach, and that she ended up getting a Van Cleef and Arpels necklace after she kind of made a thing about the Maybach. And we heard that Diddy was also dating Gina and a woman named Jessie. I don't know a last name. She told us that Diddy was on antidepressants, which none of us had heard before. And we also heard more voice notes from Diddy. And Tenny indicated that the voice notes we heard the other day, those were one or two out of thousands that he sent over 3.5 years, or hundreds rather. And the voice note that we heard from Diddy at first was talking about a Turks and Caicos trip they just took together, Diddy and Jane, and he had this nickname for her, Crack Pipe. And I guess because she's so addictive. And she sent him a message back also calling him a crack pipe. And this trip to Turks also included entertainers, which Tenny made sure that the jury knew about this. This trip included entertainers, and Jane is saying that she had an amazing time. And of course, Jane has said numerous times, and this she'll add on to her response by saying, yes, I had a good time because of the time that I got to be alone with him. She also talked about the fact that he introduced her to gospel and gospel music, and they would watch sermons together, and she still watches some of these sermons to this day. And okay, this was the crazy part. She actually talked about researching why Diddy would be into watching her have intercourse with another man, and she came across the word cuckold. So she kind of referred to Diddy as a cuck on the stand, and then indicated that she did further research and described that cucks can sometimes have bisexual curiosity, meaning that they don't necessarily want to do same-sex things themselves, but they want their partner to do this so they can kind of watch and explore. And a bunch of us in the row, we were writing notes, and we were like looking at each other like, whoa, she said it. And she testified I'm still in the morning, that KK, Diddy's assistant, didn't really like her. And that was kind of a problem. She had strong opinions about her, and KK was such a big part of Diddy's life that, it kind of made their relationship difficult at times. And there was a time this morning that the drug transporting came up with Gina, or sorry, not Gina, Jane, I'm sorry. And there were text messages between Jane and KK about this, but KK kind of indicated in these text messages that she didn't really know what was going on because she didn't have information about these drugs. It was one of the security guards that did. And the Tenny kept saying, you didn't talk to KK about this on the phone, you just texted. And Jane said, oh, well, we did talk for 1 minute, but it seemed like Tenny wanted to get all this out there. And I didn't quite understand why. I still don't necessarily understand why. I'm thinking that she wanted to talk about KK not having information or all the information about drugs to sort of pull her back from being a quote co-conspirator, which would align with the RICO charge. So that's a speculation, but we kind of stopped there. So there wasn't much more about KK and the drugs and the texting. Let me see, make sure I didn't. We saw a lot more about Jane and Diddy kind of going back and forth about when she would indicate she didn't necessarily want to be with these escorts, how they would talk about the house, or they would talk about how, it was brought up before that Diddy would say, okay, well, do you need 3 months? And Tenny Garagos was kind of turning that into a positive because with the house, Diddy had paid the security deposit and he had paid the first month and the last month. And then he offered this 3-month thing if they were to break up. So Tenny was kind of like, well, that's ample amount of money, is it not? And I think that Jane was just trying to get across like that's beside the point, but it was brought up. And also we saw text messages where Diddy would say, we don't have to do this. We don't need to be with an escort. It can be just us or entertainer. And let me see. Yes. Okay. So let's get to the afternoon, because that's where it got pretty crazy and spicy. So a lot of the afternoon was spent on very explicit and graphic text messages between Jane and Diddy, and a lot of these messages included Jane fantasizing about the entertainers. The defense really wanted to get that in, get that out there. And I'm telling you, one of the female jurors was horrified. It was uncomfortable. I won't lie. And Tenny had Jane read some of these. I can't say them on YouTube. I cannot say them. But yeah, so that was a majority of the afternoon and most likely got her kind of primed up for this moment. So this was a moment where we started off with a text message between Diddy and Jane, where Diddy is saying he misses her, and then he kind of brings up wanting to see her with these 2 escorts or 2 different escorts, Paul and Cabral. And she's kind of placating, playing back, and then apparently she sees something on Instagram of him buying another woman who I believe is Young Miami a Chanel bag. So Jane is kind of like, I didn't really sign up for this, you being with another person publicly, while I'm over here doing these hotel nights. And also she's like, you didn't really miss me. You just want me to set up this hotel night and you're over there with this other woman. And she said something like, you're even buying her Chanel bags, LOL. And let me get to the exact section because, okay. So this encounter or this back and forth elicited a gasp from the jury, looks in the gallery, and Diddy's face was like he kind of looked like a child because he was just so shocked. So when Tenny had asked her, okay, so he got this woman a Chanel bag. Well, were you upset that you didn't get a Chanel bag? And she's like, she basically said no. And she said, well, you didn't get a Chanel bag, but you did get a Bottega bag, because she had testified he got her a Bottega bag one day, and you did get a Van Cleef necklace. And Jane said, I got trauma. And everyone's like, okay. And then she said, how much is a Bottega bag? This is Tenny. And Jane said, how much is my body worth? And then it got a little spicy. And then Tenny said, well, what is a Bottega bag? And she goes, you should know, you probably have one. And Tenny's like, I don't actually. And then the judge was like, okay, Jane, can you please just answer the questions as you are asked? Like, please pull back a little bit. And then Jane actually asked for a break after that. So it definitely got a little bit spicy. And she took a break. She came back and she actually ended up apologizing. And it was fine. They moved along at that point. But let me see what else. What else? Okay, so pretty much the last part of today's cross was a text message where Jane had told Diddy that she feels the sexiest for these hotel nights when she's drinking wine. And she gets wine intoxicated. And Diddy said, oh, I didn't know that. And this is via text. I don't have to give you Molly, or we don't have to do Molly. And, so Tenny was like, okay, so he didn't know this. And he's saying, well, we don't have to do drugs together. And then Jane indicates that, okay, it's fine. Don't worry. We can still do this debaucherous night the next day after I have something else. They had brought some date up before. And then Diddy responds with, we don't have to go crazy, meaning debauchery, for the rest of the year. And Jane indicates on the stand that this was him with undertones of being disappointed in her, because she says back to that, it's okay with me, meaning it's okay that we do this debauchery. So, and then, the text message continues on where she says, I love it all with you. And then Diddy writes back, I love the times that it's just me and you. So the defense really wanted to highlight this. And then there was just another moment that the defense highlighted about, I think it was, yes, July of 2024. Jane actually said she missed one of the escorts or entertainers, Paul, and it was her idea, I guess, to invite Paul over to their LA home, or her LA home. And she actually said she had made love to Paul, or referred to their time as making love. Diddy was there, but that's pretty much where we ended for today. All right, guys, thank you so much for listening to the Daily Diddy Digest. I know that was a lot, and we will continue with the cross-examination of Jane tomorrow, and I'll be back then. Thanks for listening to the Daily Diddy Digest.